The coffee mug trembled in Valentina Viper Restrepo's weathered hands as the familiar thunder rolled across the Nevada desert. 23 years since she'd heard that sound, the distinctive growl of General Electric TF-34 turbofans pushing an A-10 Thunderbolt through scorching air. The other waitresses at Miguel's diner barely glanced up from their morning prep, but Valentina's entire body had gone rigid. Her knuckles whitened around the ceramic handle, as memories she'd buried deeper than any desert grave clawed their way to the surface. The aircraft's shadow swept across the diner's parking lot, impossibly low, impossibly precise. Through the grease-stained window, she watched the twin-engine beast bank hard left, its shark-mouth nose art grinning like death incarnate. But something was wrong. The pilot wasn't maintaining proper altitude for a standard flyover. The stick-and-rudder work was too aggressive, too desperate. Valentina had seen that kind of flying before, in the mountains of Afghanistan, when fuel was critical and time was measured in heartbeats. She set down the mug with deliberate care, her movements suddenly fluid despite her 51 years. The other staff knew her as Val, the quiet woman who'd worked doubles for 8 years without complaint, who spoke Spanish with the kitchen crew and never mentioned where she'd learned to calculate fuel consumption rates in her head. They had no idea that the woman refilling their coffee had once been worth $400 million, or that she'd walked away from an aerospace empire to serve hash browns in the middle of nowhere. The A-10's engines grew fainter, but Valentina's pulse hadn't slowed. She pressed her palm against the window, feeling the desert heat through the glass. Somewhere out there, a pilot was in trouble. The kind of trouble that made you push a 30,000-pound aircraft beyond its limits, that made you risk everything on a prayer and superior training. She'd been that pilot once, back when her call sign meant something, when senators knew her name and defense contractors competed for her attention. Now she was nobody, exactly how she'd wanted it. The morning rush began filtering in construction workers, long-haul truckers, retirees escaping Phoenix heat. Valentina smiled and poured coffee, but her eyes kept drifting skyward. The A-10 had disappeared beyond the mountains, leaving only contrails and questions. In her pocket, an encrypted satellite phone she hadn't touched in years began to vibrate with an incoming message. Her civilian life was about to collide with a past that some people would kill to keep buried. The hunt was beginning, and Viper was the prey. The encrypted message burned into Valentina's retinas. Phoenix down. Package COMPROMICD. They know about Meridian. Run. The sender's designation was Ghost 7, a call sign that belonged to someone she'd thought was dead for over 2 decades. Her hands moved automatically, deleting the message and powering down the phone, while her mind raced through implications and survival protocols she'd hoped never to use again. Miguel's diner continued its breakfast rhythm around her, orders called out in Spanish, bacon sizzling on the flat top, regulars debating politics over bottomless coffee. But Valentina was already gone. Her consciousness shifted into the tactical awareness that had kept her alive through 17 combat deployments. She scanned the parking lot through peripheral vision, cataloging vehicles, exit routes, and potential threats. The white panel van that had been there yesterday was gone, replaced by a black Suburban with tinted windows. Government plates. "Val, table 6 needs more coffee," called Maria, the day manager. Valentina nodded, grabbing the pot, but her movement patterns had changed. She was ghosting now, minimizing profile, keeping her back to walls, maintaining situational awareness. 23 years of civilian life couldn't erase 3 decades of military training. It was like muscle memory written in survival instincts and classified operations. The construction workers at Table 6 were discussing the morning's flyover. "Damn near took my hard hat off," laughed one, a sun-weathered man with JENKINS embroidered on his shirt. Pilot was showing off flying that low. His companion shook his head. "Military don't show off like that. Something was wrong with that bird." Valentina's hand steadied as she poured their coffee, but internally she was calculating. If Ghost 7 was alive and using old protocols, then Operation Meridian hadn't died with the rest of Task Force 117. Someone had kept digging. She'd built Meridian from nothing, a private aerospace company that officially manufactured precision guidance systems for commercial satellites. Unofficially, they developed technology that could track and eliminate any aircraft on Earth with frightening accuracy. When she discovered the Pentagon plan to weaponize her innovations for targeted assassinations of foreign leaders, she destroyed everything. Labs, prototypes, research data, all of it turned to ash in a single night. Then she'd vanished, leaving behind a fortune and a legacy to become a ghost in the desert. But ghosts could be hunted too. The Suburban's engine started, its occupants moving with the practiced efficiency of federal agents. Valentina finished pouring coffee, returned the pot to its warmer, and walked calmly to the employee break room. Her go-bag had been hidden there for 8 years. Fake IDs, cash, a Glock 19 with 2 spare magazines, and a motorcycle key. She'd always known this day might come. The back door opened silently, and she stepped into blazing desert heat. The Kawasaki Ninja roared to life between her legs, its engine note sharp and urgent against the desert silence. Valentina had bought it used from a Marine corporal returning from deployment. 800 pounds of Japanese precision engineering that could outrun anything the federal government put on 4 wheels. She'd kept it maintained and ready, like everything else in her carefully constructed civilian life. Now it was her lifeline. Dust plumes rose behind the Suburban as it rounded the diner, but Valentina was already ghost riding through the employee parking area, using delivery trucks and storage containers for concealment. The bike's narrow profile made her nearly invisible until she wanted to be seen. She'd learned motorcycle tactics from a Delta Force sergeant in Kandahar, back when staying alive meant thinking like prey and moving like a predator. The desert highway stretched ahead like a heat-shimmered ribbon, empty except for an 18-wheeler hauling cattle and a battered pickup truck with California plates. Valentina merged into traffic, keeping her speed legal and her profile low. In her mirrors, the Suburban had reached the highway but hadn't spotted her yet. Government training focused on surveillance and intimidation, not desert pursuit riding. That would buy her maybe 20 minutes before they brought in air assets. Her encrypted phone buzzed against her chest, another message from Ghost 7. She couldn't risk stopping to read it, but the timing suggested urgency. Phoenix Down was military code for a downed pilot behind enemy lines. If someone was using that designation, they were either in mortal danger or already dead. Either way, her past was demanding payment on old debts. The cattle truck ahead was struggling with an incline, black diesel smoke pouring from its exhaust stack. Valentina downshifted and swept around it, using the semi's bulk to mask her movement from aerial observation. 23 years ago, she'd flown combat missions with less strategic thinking than she was applying to a simple highway run. The stakes felt just as high. Her phone buzzed again, then again. Someone was desperate to make contact, using protocols that activated emergency response networks she'd helped design. But Ghost 7 had been Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, killed in a helicopter crash over the Hindu Kush in 2002. His body had been recovered, his funeral attended by 300 Marines and half the Joint Chiefs. She'd given the eulogy herself, promising his widow that his sacrifice meant something. Dead men don't send encrypted messages. The highway crested a ridge, and Valentina saw them, 3 black helicopters approaching from the south, flying nap of the earth to avoid radar detection. Military surplus A-60 Black Hawks, probably operated by contractors with federal authorization. They'd found her trail faster than expected, which meant someone was feeding them real-time intelligence. She twisted the throttle, and the Ninja lunged forward like a mechanical cheetah. The hunt was accelerating, and she was running out of desert to hide in. The exit ramp appeared like salvation, a narrow strip of asphalt leading to an abandoned mining operation that had been closed since the 1980s. Valentina leaned the Ninja hard right, feeling the rear tire slide momentarily on loose gravel before finding purchase. Behind her, the Black Hawks were spreading into a search pattern, their pilots following textbook pursuit protocols. But textbooks didn't account for someone who'd written half the manual on evasion and survival. The mining complex was a maze of rusted equipment, collapsed buildings, and tailings ponds that had been drying for 40 years. Valentina navigated through it like she'd memorized the layout, which she had. 8 years of living in the desert had taught her every hiding place, every escape route, every advantage the landscape could provide. She'd learned to think like the Apache who'd once called this land home, invisible, patient, deadly when cornered. The Ninja's engine echoed off concrete walls as she guided it into an abandoned equipment shed. The roof had partially collapsed, but the steel framework provided perfect camouflage from aerial observation. She killed the engine and listened to the desert silence, broken only by the distant thrum of helicopter rotors and the ticking of cooling metal. Her watch showed 10:47 a.m. The federal agents would need approximately 12 minutes to establish a perimeter around the complex. That gave her time to read Ghost 7's messages and plan her next move. The first message was coordinates, latitude and longitude pointing to a location 60 miles northeast. The second was more disturbing. Meridian tech alive, shadow buyers, Viper protocol active. The third made her blood freeze. They have Diana. Diana, her daughter. The child she'd given up for adoption 24 years ago to keep her safe from the world of black operations and defense contracts. The girl who'd grown up believing her mother was an army medic killed in Iraq, who'd graduated from MIT and joined the Air Force as a pilot. Captain Diana Cross, call sign Phoenix, flying A-10s out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. The A-10 from this morning hadn't been showing off. It had been trying to reach her. Valentina's hands shook as she typed a response. Location secure. Sending coordinates. What's the play? The encryption would take 30 seconds to process, 30 seconds during which 3 Black Hawks were closing her position and federal agents were coordinating with local law enforcement. But Diana was alive, and that changed everything. The response came back immediately. Extraction 1200 hours. Bring everything. They want Meridian for Chinese buyers. War crime potential. Then a final message that explained everything. This is Diana. Ghost 7 was my father's call sign. MARCUSWEBB was my adoptive father. I know who you are, Mom. The world shifted on its axis. Diana wasn't just her daughter. She was Marcus Webb's adopted daughter, raised by the man Valentina had loved and lost to war. The girl she'd given away to protect had been raised by the only other person who'd known the truth about Operation Meridian. Outside, helicopter rotors were getting closer. The desert heat pressed against Valentina like a living thing as she studied the tactical situation unfolding around the mining complex. Through gaps in the rusted metal walls, she could see dust clouds marking vehicle positions, at least 6 black SUVs forming a loose perimeter. Professional work, but they were thinking like law enforcement, not military. They'd left the northern approach unguarded, probably assuming the terrain was too rough for vehicle escape. They were wrong. Her encrypted phone showed an incoming call from Diana, Phoenix. Valentina hesitated, then answered. This is Viper. The words felt strange after 23 years of silence, like putting on a uniform that no longer fit quite right. Mom, Diana's voice carried the controlled tension of a combat pilot under stress. I've got maybe 3 minutes before they triangulate this signal. Dad Marcus left me everything when he died last year. Cancer. The whole truth about Meridian, about what you built and why you destroyed it. Someone's been selling pieces of your technology to shadow buyers. Chinese military, Iranian proxies, North Korean weapons programs. Valentina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of old sins. How much do they have? Enough to track and kill any aircraft in the world. They've already used it twice. A Ukrainian transport over the Black Sea, a Japanese reconnaissance plane near Taiwan. Both looked like mechanical failures, but the forensics don't lie. Your guidance system signatures were all over the wreckage. The helicopters were directly overhead now, their rotor wash stirring up decades of accumulated dust. Valentina moved deeper into the equipment shed, using a rusted bulldozer for concealment. What's your operational status, Phoenix? I've got an A-10 fueled and armed at a private strip 40 miles northeast, but they've grounded me officially, pending investigation. Someone leaked that I was Marcus Webb's daughter, connected me to you. Half the Pentagon thinks I'm compromised. Diana's voice hardened. The other half thinks I'm dead. My flight leader tried to shoot me down over the Gila River this morning. I barely made it out. That explained the desperate flying Valentina had witnessed. Her daughter, their daughter, had been marked for elimination by her own command structure. The revelation hit her like a physical blow, 24 years of careful separation destroyed in a single betrayal. They're using you as bait, Valentina realized. Draw me out, eliminate us both, and the Meridian secret dies forever. Maybe, but I have something they don't know about. Diana's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. Marcus didn't just adopt me, he trained me. Everything he learned about black operations, about staying invisible, about fighting dirty when the mission demands it. And Mom, I know where you hid the master protocols, the ones that can shut down every piece of Meridian technology ever built. Valentina's breath caught. She'd told Marcus about the kill's switches built into every system, the quantum encryption keys that could render all Meridian technology inert with a single transmission. But that was decades ago, pillow talk between lovers who thought they were saving the world. The extraction point, she said. How do we get there? Trust me, Diana replied, just as the first federal agent kicked in the shed's door. Valentina moved before conscious thought engaged, muscle memory from 3 decades of combat operations taking control. The federal agent, young, confident, wearing tactical gear worth more than most people's cars, had expected to find a middle-aged waitress cowering behind rusted machinery. Instead, he found himself staring into the eyes of someone who'd killed enemy combatants with improvised weapons and government authorization. The Glock 19 appeared in her hands like magic, muzzle centered on his chest before he could process the threat. His partner, following standard breach protocol, was scanning left while his lead man went right. Amateur hour. Valentina had taught better tactics to Afghan militia fighters. Federal agents, drop your weapon. The young man's voice cracked slightly, betraying his inexperience. His finger was on his rifle's trigger, but his stance was wrong, his breathing elevated. He was thinking like law enforcement, arrest, detention, processing through legal channels. Valentina was thinking like a soldier, eliminate threats, complete the mission, survive. You're not federal agents, she said calmly, nodding details that confirmed her suspicions. Wrong equipment, wrong patches, wrong tactical doctrine. Private military contractors, probably former military, hired through shell companies to maintain plausible deniability. Your employer wants this off the books. The second man shifted position, trying to flank her, but the shed's layout worked in her favor. She'd positioned herself behind the bulldozer's blade, using the steel as both cover and concealment. 23 years of waitressing had kept her in better shape than most people half her age, and the tactical mindset never really went dormant. Ma'am, we just want to talk, the first agent lied. His partner was signaling for backup, using hand gestures that Valentina recognized from her own military service. These men had training, but they lacked the experience that came from actual combat. They'd probably never faced an opponent who'd survived 17 deployments in hostile territory. Her encrypted phone buzzed, a message from Diana. 60 seconds out, get ready to move. The distinctive sound of turbine engines reached them through the desert air, low and fast approaching. Not helicopters this time. Something with significantly more firepower and infinitely better piloting. Valentina smiled for the first time in hours, recognizing the specific acoustic signature of General Electric TF-34 turbofans pushing 30,000 pounds of armored aircraft through superheated air. You gentlemen might want to reconsider your career choices, she advised, as the A-10 Thunderbolt appeared over the mining complex like an avenging angel. Its GAU-8 Avenger cannon could fire 70 rounds per second of 30mm depleted uranium shells. Each round was designed to penetrate tank armor. The federal agent's tactical gear would provide approximately zero protection. The aircraft's distinctive shark-mouth nose art grinned down at them as Diana, Phoenix, demonstrated why she'd earned her call sign. The A-10 came in low and fast, its cannon spitting fire into the ground 50 meters from the shed. The message was clear: surrender or be destroyed. Both agents hit the ground as debris rained down around them. The A-10's second pass was pure artistry, a demonstration of close air support flying that belonged in military training manuals. Diana brought the aircraft in from the west, using the morning sun as concealment, then dropped to 20 feet above the desert floor. Her cannon fire walked across the mining complex in perfectly controlled bursts, each impact precisely calculated to intimidate without causing casualties. The federal agents and their helicopter support scattered like startled rabbits. Valentina used the chaos to her advantage, moving through the complex with the fluid grace of someone who'd learned urban warfare in Iraqi cities and Afghan mountains. The ninja was still hidden in the equipment shed, but reaching it meant crossing 50 meters of open ground under possible sniper observation. She'd made harder moves in worse situations, but 23 years had added mileage to joints that had already endured more punishment than most bodies could handle. The encrypted phone buzzed with coordinates, a location 2 miles northeast where Diana could safely land the A-10. Highway 95 ran through that area, a straight stretch of abandoned asphalt that could serve as an improvised airstrip. But getting there meant evading a federal manhunt that was escalating by the minute. More helicopters were approaching from the south, and radio chatter indicated ground units moving to establish roadblocks. "Viper, this is Phoenix." Diana's voice crackled through the encrypted channel, calm despite the chaos she was orchestrating. "I've got 3 Black Hawks converging on your position and at least 12 ground units. You've got maybe 4 minutes before they lock down the entire grid." Valentina reached the ninja and kick-started it with practiced efficiency. The engine's roar seemed impossibly loud in the confined space, but sound discipline was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Phoenix, be advised, these aren't federal agents. Private contractors, probably Chinese-funded. Someone's trying to acquire Meridian technology through black market channels." "Copy that. Dad left files suggesting the same thing. Someone's been selling pieces of your work to the highest bidder, but they need the master protocols to make it fully operational." Diana's A-10 screamed overhead again, this time releasing chaff and flares in a brilliant display of electronic countermeasures. The approaching helicopters immediately began evasive maneuvers, their pilots assuming they were under attack by surface-to-air missiles. "Extraction point in 90 seconds, Diana continued. "But Mom, there's something else. The buyers aren't just interested in aircraft tracking. They want the full Meridian package. Satellite guidance, quantum encryption, autonomous targeting systems. If they get it, they can turn any civilian aircraft into a guided missile." The implications hit Valentina like a physical blow as she guided the motorcycle through the mining complex's maze of abandoned buildings. She designed Meridian systems to protect commercial aviation from terrorist attacks, to make the skis safer for everyone. But the same technology that could track and intercept hijacked airliners could also be used to orchestrate mass casualty attacks on an unprecedented scale. She'd thought destroying her research had ended the threat. Instead, she'd only delayed it. The highway appeared ahead, shimmering in the desert heat like a mirage. Diana's A-10 was already on approach, its landing gear extended, preparing to use the abandoned asphalt as an improvised runway. It was the kind of flying that required absolute confidence in both aircraft and pilot, exactly the sort of impossible maneuver that separated true combat aviators from everyone else. The A-10 touched down on Highway 95 with the delicate precision of a hummingbird landing on a flower, despite weighing 15 tons and traveling at 140 miles per hour. Diana's flying was flawless, textbook approach angle, perfect speed management, landing rollout that used every available foot of asphalt. Valentina had watched thousands of combat landings during her military career, but she'd never felt the pride that swelled in her chest as her daughter demonstrated skills that would have impressed the most demanding flight instructors. The ninja's speedometer hit 90 as Valentina raced toward the rendezvous point, weaving between abandoned cars and debris that littered the old highway. Behind her, dust plumes marked the positions of pursuing vehicles, but they were still 2 miles back and losing ground. The motorcycle's advantage in rough terrain was absolute. Where SUVs had to navigate carefully around obstacles, she could thread through gaps at full throttle. Diana was already out of the cockpit when Valentina arrived, moving with the efficient grace of a pilot who'd completed hundreds of combat sorties. She was smaller than Valentina had imagined, maybe 5'4", with a compact build that served fighter pilots well in high-G environments. Her flight suit bore the patches of the 354th Fighter Squadron, the Bulldogs, along with ribbons indicating 2 deployments to Southwest Asia. This wasn't some weekend warrior playing soldier. This was a combat veteran with blood on her hands and steel in her spine. Mom! The single word carried 24 years of questions, anger, and desperate hope. Diana's eyes were Valentina's own, dark brown, intelligent, calculating. But they held something Valentina had lost decades ago, the absolute certainty that came from knowing exactly who you were and what you stood for. Diana! Valentina killed the ninja's engine and dismounted, studying the young woman who'd somehow inherited both her tactical instincts and Marcus Webb's moral clarity. We have approximately 3 minutes before they establish visual contact. What's the mission parameters? Straight to business. I like that. Diana moved to the A-10's external storage compartments, retrieving equipment that definitely wasn't standard Air Force issue. Night vision goggles, encrypted communications gear, weapons that belonged to special operations units rather than fighter squadrons. Dad left instructions. If Meridian technology ever surfaced again, we were supposed to activate something called Protocol 7. Total destruction of all related systems, worldwide, permanent. Valentina's blood turned to ice water. Protocol 7 was the nuclear option, a quantum virus that would seek out and destroy every piece of technology containing Meridian guidance systems. Military, civilian, commercial, everything. It would cripple half the world's aviation industry and strand thousands of aircraft in flight. She designed it as an absolute last resort, assuming it would never be used. Diana, Protocol 7 would kill innocent people. Commercial airliners, medical helicopters, search and rescue operations. Less than what happens if this technology reaches full operational status. Diana's voice carried the weight of someone who'd made hard choices and lived with the consequences. Dad showed me the classified assessments. Meridian in the wrong hands could down 100 aircraft simultaneously. Passenger jets turned into guided missiles, targeting population centers or critical infrastructure. We're talking about potential casualties in the millions. The sound of helicopter rotors was getting closer, multiple aircraft converging on their position. Valentina made a decision that went against every instinct she'd developed in 3 decades of military service. Get us airborne. We're going to end this once and for all. The A-10's cockpit was designed for one person, but Diana had modified the rear equipment bay to accommodate a passenger. Barely. Valentina squeezed into a space originally meant for survival gear, surrounded by black boxes and computer terminals that looked like they belonged on a spacecraft rather than a military aircraft. Every surface was covered with switches, displays, and cable connections that spoke to serious electronic warfare capabilities. Dad's modifications, Diana explained as she strapped herself into the pilot's seat. Took him 15 years to design and install. The Air Force thinks this is a standard A-10C actually. It's got more computing power than most submarines and electronic countermeasures that could jam half the satellites in orbit. The twin turbofans spooled up with a sound like controlled fury, 30,000 pounds of thrust pushing them down the highway at rapidly increasing speed. Valentina felt the familiar sensation of flight, that moment when physics yielded to engineering and human willpower, when tons of metal and fuel defied gravity through nothing more than speed and aerodynamics. She hadn't flown since leaving the military, but the sensation was like coming home after a long exile. "Phoenix, this is Hammer 7-1, a voice crackled through the radio. Military terminology, proper call signs. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Respond on this frequency." Diana's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Hammer 7-1, this is Phoenix. Negative on RTB. Currently engaged in authorized special operations. Maintain distance." "Phoenix, you do not have authorization for special operations. Land immediately, or we will be forced to engage." Valentina leaned forward, studying the radar display. 3 aircraft approaching from the southeast, F-16 Fighting Falcons, traveling at Mach 1.2 and climbing. Their weapons systems were active, missiles armed and ready. The United States Air Force was preparing to shoot down one of its own pilots. Diana, those are your squadron mates. People you've flown with, trained with. People who have been told I'm a traitor and a terrorist. Diana's hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, activating systems that weren't listed in any technical manual. Dad's files showed evidence of deep infiltration throughout the command structure. Chinese intelligence has been buying military personnel for years, placing assets in positions where they can influence operations and acquire sensitive technology. The A-10 banked hard left, pulling G-forces that pressed Valentina deep into her improvised seat. Through the cockpit canopy, she could see the pursuing F-16s adjusting their intercept course, closing distance with the relentless precision of guided missiles. Each aircraft carried enough firepower to level a city block, piloted by men and women who believed they were protecting national security. "What's our play?" Valentina asked, nodding that Diana's hands hadn't moved toward the weapon controls. Even facing betrayal and potential death, she wasn't prepared to fire on American military personnel. "We don't fight them, we disappear." Diana's smile was pure Marcus Webb, confident, slightly reckless, absolutely committed to the mission. Dad didn't just modify the electronics. He gave this old warthog some new tricks. She flipped a switch labeled Ghost Mode, and every display in the cockpit went dark. The radar signature vanished like smoke in a hurricane. One moment, the A-10 was painting a bright return on every tracking system within 200 miles. The next, it had become electronically invisible, a ghost aircraft flying through airspace that military controllers suddenly couldn't monitor or intercept. Valentina felt the familiar disorientation that came with complete electronic warfare blackout, when all the technology you'd learned to depend on simply stopped working. "Stealth technology," Diana explained, her voice barely audible over the engine noise. "Not the conventional kind. Dad figured out how to bend radar waves around the aircraft's signature using programmable metamaterials and quantum field manipulation. We're still here, but their instruments think we've vanished into thin air." The F-16s were circling like confused hornets, their pilots radioing increasingly frantic reports about lost contact and system malfunctions. Valentina could imagine the chaos erupting in air traffic control centers across the region. A military aircraft had simply disappeared from all tracking systems while flying through some of the most heavily monitored airspace in the world. "How long can we maintain this?" she asked, studying terrain features through the cockpit windows. They were flying northeast, toward the Colorado Plateau, leaving the flat Nevada desert for increasingly mountainous terrain. The landscape below was painted in shades of red and gold, ancient rock formations that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. 20 minutes, maybe 30. The power requirements are enormous, and we're already running on fumes. Diana adjusted their heading, following a flight path that seemed to have been carefully planned in advance. "But it's enough to reach the facility where Dad stored the Protocol 7 activation codes." "What facility?" Valentina's tactical awareness was screaming warnings. Marcus Webb had been a marine intelligence officer, not a technology entrepreneur. He shouldn't have had access to the kind of resources required to maintain a classified research facility. "Something he never told you about. After you disappeared, he didn't just adopt me and fade into civilian life. He kept investigating Meridian, tracking down everyone who'd been involved in the project, following the money trails and technology transfers. What he found scared him enough to spend his entire fortune building a hardened facility where he could store the most dangerous secrets." The A-10 dropped into a canyon system that wasn't marked on any public maps, following a course that required precision flying through landscape that could kill an inexperienced pilot in seconds. Diana handled it like she'd made this flight 100 times before, threading the aircraft between rock walls that sometimes came within 50 feet of their wingtips. "He knew this day would come," she continued. "Knew that eventually someone would acquire enough Meridian technology to pose an existential threat. So he prepared. Contingency plans, backup systems, fail-safes built on top of fail-safes. Everything needed to destroy what you'd built before it could be used to destroy civilization." They emerged from the canyon into a hidden valley that shouldn't have existed on the Colorado Plateau. A perfect circle of flat land surrounded by towering cliffs, invisible from above and accessible only through the narrow passage they'd just navigated. In the center of the valley sat a concrete structure that looked like a military bunker, its design clearly influenced by Cold War-era nuclear command facilities. "Welcome to Marcus Webb's final gift to national security," Diana said as she lined up for landing. "And your last chance to fix what went wrong 23 years ago." The bunker's interior was a monument to paranoia and exceptional engineering. Corridors lined with electromagnetic shielding and blast-resistant barriers that could withstand anything short of a direct nuclear strike. Marcus Webb had built a fortress designed to survive the end of the world, then filled it with enough classified technology to start several new wars. Valentina followed Diana through checkpoints that required biometric scans, vocal pattern recognition, and genetic analysis before granting access to deeper levels. "He spent $40 million on construction alone," Diana explained, leading them past server rooms that hummed with cooling systems and backup power generators. Another $100 million on equipment and security systems. The man was absolutely convinced that someday someone would try to acquire or steal Meridian technology, and he wanted to be ready. The Central Command Center could have belonged to NASA Mission Control, banks of monitors displaying global satellite feeds, communication intercepts, and tracking data for aircraft movements worldwide. But what caught Valentina's attention was the wall display showing real-time locations of every piece of technology containing Meridian guidance systems. Hundreds of red dots scattered across 6 continents, each representing millions of dollars in sophisticated hardware that was currently being used for purposes she'd never intended. "Sweet Mother of God," she whispered, studying the display. "How many systems are compromised?" "Over 800 confirmed installations, with more coming online every month." Diana moved to a central console and began entering access codes. Commercial airlines, military aircraft, cargo haulers, even some civilian helicopters. Someone's been selling Meridian components through shell companies and front organizations for years, building a global network of trackable and targetable aircraft. Valentina studied the data streams flowing across multiple monitors, recognizing patterns and algorithms she'd developed decades ago. But they'd been modified, refined, weaponized beyond anything she'd originally envisioned. Her guidance systems could now identify individual aircraft by their electronic signatures, track them through multiple radar networks, and feed targeting data to weapons systems with lethal precision. "The buyers," she said, understanding finally dawning. "They're not just acquiring the technology. They're building a comprehensive database of global aviation assets. Every commercial airliner, every military transport, every private jet, all of it cataloged and vulnerable to attack." Worse than that, Diana brought up a new display showing financial transactions traced through cryptocurrency exchanges and offshore banking networks. "The technology is being sold with guaranteed technical support, live updates, system patches, even training programs for operators. Someone's running this like a legitimate business, complete with customer service and maintenance contracts." The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. This wasn't simple technology theft or industrial espionage. This was preparation for something that could cripple global aviation permanently, turning the skis into a weapon of mass destruction. Every aircraft equipped with Meridian technology was a potential guided missile, controlled by whoever held the master authorization codes. "Diana," Valentina said slowly, "Protocol 7 isn't going to be enough. Even if we destroy every existing system, they'll just build new ones using the design specifications they've already acquired. We need to poison the well, make the technology itself unusable by contaminating the core algorithms with recursive errors that will cascade through any attempt at replication." Diana's smile was sharp and predatory. "That's exactly what Dad figured you'd say. He spent 10 years developing a quantum virus specifically designed to do exactly that. But activating it requires both our authorization codes, entered simultaneously." She gestured toward a control station with 2 input terminals, separated by enough distance that no single person could operate them alone. Marcus Webb's final safeguard, ensuring that the power to destroy Meridian technology forever required cooperation between the woman who,